Alright, so... so here we are with the battle. Hopefully you guys watched the team builder, but if not, I'm going very, very hyper offensive to try to counter what I thought was going to be a very bulky team. Instead, he looks like he went hyper offensive also, pretty much, with Armaldo and Zapdos presumably being his walls. I'm assuming that Mamoswine or Volcanion are scarfed, which probably makes Lucario a setup sweeper of some kind, so I have to be very careful for all of these things. I'm not really sure what Melobutta could do, to be honest, because it could be, it could just be like a Specs Relic Song set. It could be a sub called Mine set. Oh, by the way, sorry if there's video in the way, whatever, I don't have time to fix that. But it can do quite a lot of damage to my team, so I have to be pretty careful. My initial lead this week was pretty much going to be something to counter a Stealth Rock's Mamoswine. I guess in this situation I also have to prepare for Stealth Rock's Armaldo. He could also just lead Zapdos to try to Volt Switch. It'd be kind of risky since I have Nidoking, but if he feels like he gets a free Volt Switch off, then I guess good on him. So my plan is to counter Mamoswine here, so I decided to lead Thundurus-Therian. My plan behind this is to Focus Blast originally. Since I'm scarfed, I'm gonna outspeed, and if he didn't lead Mamoswine for whatever reason, I could probably get a Volt Switch off. I think at the time of the battle, I was also kind of fearing a scarfed Volcanion lead just to do like as much damage to me as possible. But I decided to ultimately lead Thundurus-Therian here. At worst, I get to fire off a Focus Blast, or I get to hard switch into something, which isn't really the end of the world. I'm gonna decide to hard switch. I know I outspeed since Thundurus got sent out first, but I don't want to go for Focus Blast turn 1. This isn't the UCL. I'm not gonna land it, so I'm just gonna be careful. Go to Granbull, see what this thing wants to do. Surprisingly, goes for Stone Edge. This reveals to me first off that it's scarfed, because there's no reason for it to go for Stone Edge right there unless it's scarfed thinking it's gonna outspeed and one-hit KO me. But to be honest, I'm a little confused why it went for Stone Edge over Icicle Crash anyway, just because it kind of seems like Icicle Crash would have done a lot more. And that's something I haven't mentioned yet, but looking at this team, the only thing at all that wants to switch in is Scizor. And even then, Scizor doesn't really want to switch into an Earthquake. It'll take Icicle Crash is okay, but it doesn't really want to switch to an Earthquake. So Mamoswine's an issue, and seeing that it's scarfed, and, well, didn't go for rocks, which is nice, but I don't really have a very good way to capitalize on that, unfortunately. So I'm just going to go for a Toxic here, hoping to catch something, and I end up catching the Zapdos, which is really nice, and pretty much best case scenario, honestly. He very easily could have gone into Lucario there to try to Iron Head or Bullet Punch or something, but I didn't really think that it was that likely of a switch, because if I just went for a close combat or something of my own, which actually would have been fairly likely since there's an Ice type in front of me, I would have done a ridiculous amount of damage to Lucario. So it was a risky prediction to make to go for Toxic, but I figured worst case scenario I'm in against Lucario and could just switch into my answer for that too, I guess. So I'm pretty happy I got the Toxic off, because like I said in the team builder, Zapdos is an issue. It goes for a Thunderbolt here, mainly just because I'm trying to scout what kind of set it is. Also, I'm really sorry that this bar keeps popping up on the side from the video. There's nothing I can do about that for this week. So I go for a Rock Slide and find out that this thing is definitely, it definitely has some physical bulk. I'm not 100% sure yet if it's like fully physically defensive or not, but I know that it has enough bulk that I need to be careful, because if you watch my team builder, Mega-Absol is my like direct OHKO answer to this. and a Rock Slide, even at +2, only does 90% if it's fully physically defensive, so I have to keep this thing low. I decided to switch out into Thundurus just in case he decides to try to Volt Switch on me. He ends up making a good play and going for Roost, just healing off whatever damage I had done. But I figure he can't Volt Switch on me because I have Volt Absorb. He's probably not going to go back into Mamoswine right here, and if he does, I'll just play around it, I guess. So I just decided to go ahead and scout a little bit more and sack Granbull in the process. I didn't really want to sack something turn 5, but at the same time, Granbull was pretty useless this week, since he didn't bring Zard. Rock Slide wasn't doing enough to be really reliable for me to go in against Zapdos, and Intimidate would have been kind of nice for Mamoswine and Lucario, I guess, but it wasn't really worth it for me to keep it around. Instead, I'll let the toxic damage rack up here. You can see that he's gonna actually have to switch next turn, so he does. I end up going I actually kind of forgot what I did there, so I had to wait. I end up going for the Sucker Punch on the off chance that he actually stays in. I figure at worst case scenario I get a free Mega Evolution off, and it's basically just to protect. Sucker Punches are important this week, so I'm a little bummed that I wasted one there, but I also thought that he might just try to get greedy and do a little bit of damage and try to Volt Switch on me or something. So I thought I could catch him with Sucker Punch, and I didn't. So I can stay in, but an Scizor is going to do a ridiculous amount of damage to me, so I don't want to. I'm going to switch into Scizor to see what he wants to do. He makes a very good double here and doubles into Volcanion, and it's at this point that I realize that something has to die. So I'm analyzing my team here. Breloom does a lot of work to Meloetta, Mamoswine. It does a decent amount to Armaldo, although not as much as I would like because fighting's only neutral. It can do damage to Zapdos, and it can do a lot of damage to Lucario. So Breloom's important. Absol is pretty important, but somewhat expendable at this point, since it only really covers Meloetta and preventing rocks from getting up, as well as actually giving Lucario an attack boost, which isn't the greatest. Scizor is good for bullet punches for Mamoswine and Armaldo, but it's actually not a no-co on either of them. And it's basically just a free switch in for Volcanion at any time at this point. Nidoking does enough damage to everyone that I'm honestly not even really considering it at this point, because between Earth Power and Ice Beam, it hits everything for at least neutral, if not super effective. And Thundurus-T also has coverage that I'm not really considering, so it's basically down between Scizor and Absol here. I end up deciding that Scizor is actually the least useful of these two, and I just go for a knockoff here, fully expecting a Fire Blast to kill me. He ends up going for a Steam Eruption, which I thought was kind of interesting, but it doesn't really matter. It's more interesting, I guess, that I knocked off his Assault Vest. Obviously, a Volcanion's pretty much only going to run 4 attacks anyway, but the fact that he's Assault Vest means that he's not Scarfed, which means Nidoking outspeeds, which is very valuable information. So, like I said, nothing takes an Earth Power. I don't know why he switched into Lucario here. I think he was predicting a Sludge Wave, but I did my homework and realized that Sludge Wave wouldn't have really been a very good bring for me this week. So I just went for Earth Power. I figured if he went to Zapdos, I'd just show right here that I'm not Choice Scarfed, but instead he just goes straight into Mamoswine. So something else has to take a big hit, and unfortunately it's going to be the other thing that wasn't super useful here. I decided to just get a little bit of damage off, maybe try to gauge if it has any significant investment, I guess, and sack Absol to Mamoswine in the process. So I know he's Scarfed, so I know he can't switch it up and go for Ice Shard here. Mach Punch definitely kills, so I I decided to switch into Breloom here. I know that Mach Punch kills, and I know that he knows that Mach Punch kills, so this looks like a good time for me to get a Spore off on something and try to get some initiative. I'm down 4-3 because I forgot to take off Absol here. I'm down 4-3 and I have 2 Scarfers and a thing that I'm trying to bluff being a Scarf, so I have to be very careful with every switch from here on out. And I get the Spore off on Meloetta and it gets to sleep. So it's at this point I realize that 2 of the things I have left are weak to Meloetta. Thundurus is the only thing that can actually like kind of take a hit, and it doesn't really take a hit very well from Meloetta. So I have to be pretty careful here. I have a free switch because he's guaranteed 1 turn of sleep before he wakes up, so I just decided to go into the one thing that I have that can actually do damage. I go for a Dark Pulse, and that unfortunately does not do enough damage for me to be comfortable. And after seeing that he has leftovers, I am immediately fearing that he's Sub-Calm Mind. I watched a drive get destroyed by a Sub-Calm Mind Meloetta just this week, so I am very terrified of it. I didn't exactly prep for it, but luckily Thundurus-T's Dark Pulse is doing enough that I kind of just have to stay in. He switches out an Armaldo here, and I realize after doing that damage that this Armaldo is Assault Vested, which actually, I don't want to say it means that I lose, but it makes this battle much harder for me to win, and I'm kind of regretting sacking Scizor earlier in the game, because Bullet Punch would have been doing quite a lot of damage right now. So I decide that Breloom is probably going to be the only thing that can take a good hit from here, mainly because I expected a rock type attack. I didn't expect Rock Blast, and I didn't expect it to hit 5 times, but luckily I have just enough health investment into Breloom to be able to live again if it hits 5 times. So I end up just trying to predict and go for a Rock Tomb, predicting something else to switch in. I actually predicted the Volcanion, but the Zapdos coming in is good too, because Breloom kills the thing that was most annoying to my team, in practice at least. Unfortunately, he gets another free switch here. Mamoswine's not dead, because he goes into it right here. So he doesn't actually know that I'm Scarfed at this point, but since he's Scarfed it doesn't really matter because he outspeeds me anyway. So it's another game of what do I want to die, pretty much. And I'm looking through the options here, and Breloom hits neutrally for Armaldo, but is pretty much destroyed by every other thing on the field. Nidoking can't really touch Meloetta, and it's not going to do a ton to an Assault Vested Armaldo, but it can come in and Revenge Kill if I need it to, and it'll completely destroy Volcanion. And Thundurus-T just hits hard enough at this point and has the coverage that I kind of need to rely on it. So while everything I have is important, Breloom is the most expendable, so I decided to stay in and just go for a Rock Tomb. He goes for a double here and switches into Meloetta and actually gets a speed drop. Unfortunately, it doesn't really matter to me at this point because I still, in my mind, think that Breloom is the most expendable. So I'm just going to stay in and hope for a higher roll. He's actually going to live just because of his leftovers recovery from these past couple turns and take me out here. So now it's down to 2 versus 4. It's not looking too good, but I still have the answers, I think, to be able to pull this out if I play carefully. So he's a 0.5 speed, so even though I'm not Scarfed, I know Nidoking can come in here and kill. I'm playing this out in my head, and I realize that if I Earth Power Meloetta and he switches into Mamoswine directly after, I can Sucker Punch and maybe kill, and then hopefully try to Earth Power everything else. If I need to sack Thundurus-T, I can. If I go into Thundurus-T here and go for a Dark Pulse, he goes into Mamoswine and Icicle crashes, and then I lose, pretty much. So I have to go into Nidoking here. go for Earth Power, take out Meloetta, and it's at this point that I'm just trying to figure out a way out of this, I guess. He goes into Volcanion here, just because he felt like it, I guess. I don't know if he was trying to bluff the Scarf in hopes that I forgot that I knocked off a Solvest earlier in the game, but I guess it wasn't really doing anything for... Oh no! Fuck!